Hey there, Al Iverson here. It's time for another one of your email authentication and deliverability questions answered. And the question I'm going to tackle today is, how do mailbox providers utilize DMARC? How does DMARC actually work in a mailbox provider's workflow? And if you're wondering what I mean by mailbox provider, here's what I mean, right? If you're sending email to mostly a consumer audience, it's going to be those top three providers are going to be the biggest chunk of where the inbound email is hosted, where the consumer mailboxes are hosted. People are using Gmail, people are using Microsoft Outlook.com, and people are using Yahoo Mail, right? Those are the biggest three in the B2C space. In the B2B space, it's still Microsoft and Google at the high end there. They're the biggest providers in the B2B space. Yahoo's not as well represented there. But in both sides of the equation, whether or not it's B2B or B2C, there's a whole bunch of other providers, right? Here's just a few of them. There are thousands of other ones, and they all implement spam filtering and email message checks on inbound email. They all do it a little bit differently. There's certainly some commonality, but there's subtle differences too. So I'm talking here in broad strokes. I'll walk you through how we observe that mailbox providers utilize DMARC as one of their inbound message checks. Now, keep in mind that mailbox providers are dealing with a lot of junk, a lot of bad stuff. Some of it passes authentication, some of it doesn't. Some of the bad guys spin up their own domains and they implement email authentication. A bad guy can publish a DMARC record, can publish DKIM authentication. And so that's not the only check that a mailbox provider does. That's not an individually reliable check as to whether or not a message is good or bad. Authentication helps, though. I'll jump ahead here a little bit. We can look at authentication gives a stable identifier with which to identify reputation for a given sender, right? That's where domain reputation comes into play. There's also IP address reputation where they collate and collect statistics based on the sending IP address, log the feedback that they get from their users. That's a big part of spam filtering. So they're looking at positive signals. Are people engaging with email messages? Are people clicking and opening those email messages? On the flip side of that are negative engagement signals. Spam clicks, people clicking the "this is spam" or "report spam" button. Those are very important to mailbox providers to generate sort of reputational profiles of senders to decide what mail should be delivered to the inbox and what mail should perhaps instead be routed to the spam folder or not delivered at all. Now, there's a whole bunch of other checks there too, right? There's the reputation around different URLs in email messages. They often follow links and check to see, is there malware or other malicious content hosted on landing pages or on domain names, phishing pages, or forums that pretend to look like a bank when they're not really from that bank, trying to get people to give up personal information to maybe steal money or get access to accounts that the bad guys shouldn't have access to. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to check there too, right? The header and technical settings to make sure that stuff is formatted properly, that it complies with the relevant RFCs for email. And then there's doing things like behavioral analysis and blocklist checks, right? Checking third-party domain and IP reputation lists and looking at the reputation as measured by those third parties. Behavioral analysis, looking at what the activity is that is associated with that domain. What kind of mail is, what kind of activities are happening related to that domain? Is it good stuff? Is it bad stuff? Content fingerprinting is where you can identify that a message is bad, maybe based on spam reports. If enough people report a particular piece of content that they've fingerprinted, that they've identified, perhaps generated a checksum for, they might apply that same filtering to all of the messages that match that checksum. CloudMark is an example of that, going all the way back to Vipul's Razor, sort of the underlying tech for the original version of CloudMark, where they take these feedback reports for messages and look to identify other similar messages and treat them similarly based on content fingerprinting. Content filtering, right? That's sort of one of the oldest spam filtering models, where if a message has, buy now or excess exclamation points in the subject line. If you filter to the spam folder based on that, that's an example of content filtering. That's not as commonly done as it used to be, because it's very simplistic and very easy to false positive. But there's rules and rule sets around that, where they build up tools like publicly available tools like Spam Assassin and others, and private ones that started out based on similar mechanisms like Barracuda, for example. They build up all these different rules based on messages they've seen in the past, and that they want to filter messages based in the future based on what they've seen in the past. Then, of course, you've got the machine learning and artificial intelligence models. Those are very, very big, especially at Gmail. Gmail's used machine learning for spam filtering for a long time to help inform their efforts to help build a better mousetrap, if you will. And people ask about AI and deliverability, and Gmail's machine language spam filtering is an example of AI already being there, already existing in spam filtering. So keep in mind with all of that, right? DMARC is only a piece of that. It's a very important piece of that, but it's just a single few set of checks that the mailbox provider employs. And so, if you're a ValaMail customer using our DMARC services, you are going to use us for publishing your DMARC policy, right? That's DMARC policy management. And so that's where a mailbox provider is going to look to see how mail should be dispositioned based on the published policy set for that domain. And of course, to get to a point where you're comfortable setting your domain to enforcement, setting a restrictive DMARC policy, you start by setting up ValaMail to give you DMARC reporting to show what the sources of mail are out there using your domain. And then you go through that service identification process to identify all of the places that are legitimately sending mail as you. And then on top of that, there's other cool things that ValaMail helps clients do: SPF automation, DKIM key monitoring and management, to monitor service age, for example, to make sure your DKIM keys aren't horribly out of date. That's part of our new continuous protection reporting. And then we also have BIMI logo support. Sender logos are part of Amplify. And the goal here is that all of these things together help you protect your domains against phishing and spoofing, and monitor all the little fiddly bits along the way, keeping in mind that it's only part of what gets you your mail delivered to a mailbox provider. So that's why I decided to do this deep dive today, because people often get confused and say, hey, I've implemented DMARC. Why am I still going to the spam folder? Well, DMARC's a start. DMARC's very important, but DMARC's only part of the equation when it comes to deciding whether or not your mail gets delivered to the inbox. Keep in mind here, right, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, a whole bunch of people out there sending good mail, bad mail, malware, fraudulent mail, bulk mail, wanted mail, unwanted mail, all of this different stuff. Some of it you want, some of it you don't. And these mailbox providers have giant rule sets, giant filtering mechanisms, giant black boxes that work to try to figure out the good mail from the bad mail. So I hope you found that interesting. I thought it was neat to focus on DMARC and how specifically DMARC fits into the mailbox provider spam filtering equations, how it is part of the gatekeeping process. If you have any questions that you think might be interesting to cover in a follow-up video, please drop me an email at al.iverson@valamail.com. And don't forget to visit our website at valamail.com when you're ready to begin embarking upon your DMARC journey.